Welcome back to another FPL video and podcast. This will be the transfer tips for Game Week 17, and there is one match left of Game Week 16 with Bournemouth versus West Ham on Monday night. This video is recorded on Monday morning, and on screen you can see the most transferred in players at this point of the game week, and Robinson is top. I think 8 Nuri to Robinson is going to be an extremely popular transfer this week, and I will discuss it in my team selection and also across other videos. You've also got Isak, Amad Diallo, Lewis Hall, and Gabriel in the top 5, and towards the end of this podcast I'll show you the most transferred out players as well. Smash the like button and subscribe for new if you enjoy my content. I promise to get this to the 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 31,000 subscribers. Also check the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server, FPL League, Draft Hound, as well as Spotify. Leave a 5-star review if you want to support the channel even further, and thank you to those that have done so already. And there's going to be a lot more content with FPL over the next couple of weeks. Keep your eyes peeled for the best wildcard team, the team selection, and the deadline stream. And with UCL Fantasy, that will return next month ahead of match day 7. But in this video, I'll talk about 11 players to buy, hold, sell, and skip, and let's delve straight into the purchases that I'd recommend. The most transferred in player this week is Anthony Robinson, and with good reason. I think he's a great purchase. For the next 6 game weeks, Fulham are near the top of the fixture difficulty rating. Only Chelsea away in Game Week 18 looks tough on paper, and Fulham sometimes step it up against the best clubs in the country with back-to-back draws against Arsenal and Liverpool, albeit Liverpool were down to 10 men after Robertson's sending off. But Anthony Robinson got a brace of assists there, and he was very impressive. He's got 6 assists this season and 17 key passes. Don't expect much from him in terms of goals though. He's only had 1 shot inside the box and 1 shot on target, so the XG is very minimal, but his creativity is quite decent and he can play different roles. So against Arsenal, it was more of a job of stopping Saka and Arsenal's right-hand side, so he was very defensive in that game. And when he had more license to bomb forward at Anfield, considering the circumstances of the match, Robinson got those assists and created a few chances. So I really like Robinson. He's one of the best left-backs in the Premier League at the moment, and I think Fulham can keep several clean sheets. But the next fixture is against Southampton, who have just sacked Russell Martin, and we've got 2 managerial sackings in the same day, essentially, with Gary O'Neill also departing Wolves. But Robinson, for me, is the best Fulham defender. You might also be interested in Joachim Andersen at 4.2 million, and I don't really mind that. But I think Robinson is worth the extra 0.5 million, and it's only a matter of time before he goes up in price to 4.8 million. Nicholas Jackson is only improving with every single Chelsea appearance, and he scored a crucial goal to cement that victory over Brentford on Sunday night, and he got 2 bonus points in the process. The main reason to buy Jackson is the sea of green you get in the fixture difficulty rating. Chelsea should go on a run and win the vast majority of these games, score a lot of goals, create chances, and Jackson will be at the heart of it. Now, Cole Palmer is still my preference in terms of captaining a Chelsea player, and if he had to prioritise one Chelsea attacker, it would still be the talisman in the midfield. But Jackson is definitely next in line. I know Enzo Fernandez got yet another assist against Brentford, and he's also a very enticing option, but my preference is going for Palmer, Jackson, and then Robert Sanchez in goal. Otherwise, you might be looking at Colwill or Mark Cucurella in the defensive line, but I think Chelsea have a great opportunity to pile on the pressure on Liverpool, and they've done that in the last week. So all they need to do is maintain that consistency, keep on scoring the goals, and in the Europa Conference League, they can play their B team and give their first team players a full rest. Now, Jackson has incredible stats: 9 goals, 4 assists, an XG figure of 8.04, and 88 FPL points, only bettered by the likes of Cunha, Chris Wood, and Erling Haaland. But I think Jackson is a great option here, and he's well worth the money. Isak is just behind him in terms of FPL points, and if you have to decide between Isak or Jackson, it is a very close call, but I still prefer Nicholas Jackson because Chelsea are a more reliable team than Newcastle, and you've also got Isak's injury record, which is another reason. And on top of it, I think Jackson is just a very consistent option. He stays fit all the time, and there is minimal risk of rotation. You'll see it occasionally, and of course it was very recent that he was benched against Southampton. Will that happen with Isak? Probably not. So there are definitely pros and cons with both players, and ideally you'd go for both of them amongst your front 3 and then supplement that with a budget forward like Chris Wood. I'll be talking about this in the upcoming best wildcard team video, but Jackson is definitely a great investment, and I'd highly recommend it if you haven't gone for him already. The only downside I'd say is the yellow card risk, and that will wipe away, so to speak, around Game Week 19 when the yellow card threshold for a suspension increases from 5 to 10, but in the meantime, you have to hope that Jackson doesn't get a yellow against Everton, Fulham, or Ipswich Town. Transfers in the forward line are going to be very popular this week, especially if Matheus Cunha gets that retrospective suspension that I talked about during the reaction stream. Now, I actually sold Chris Wood last week for Nicholas Jackson, so in the end, it hasn't really resulted in any points gained, and you might actually want both of them across your front line. Brentford away is always a tough fixture because the Bees have been excellent in home matches, but they're always going to concede chances, and if Chris Wood gets a goal, Nottingham Forest might lose the game, but he can still get a bonus point or two. And if it's a victory, Chris Wood always has a great chance of getting maximum bonus points. Then you've got Tottenham at home, which is always going to be a decent fixture for attackers. And then you've got Everton and Wolves. So Forest's fixtures are getting better, and they've gotten rid of some of the most difficult ones on paper, like Man United, Man City and Arsenal away. And they've still got some results in some of those games, like that famous victory at Old Trafford for the first time in 30 years. And Chris Wood scored and got a bonus point. That's 10 goals for the season. He had one disallowed against Aston Villa, and it was a late comeback from Nottingham Forest to cement themselves in the top 4, which is simply incredible. Nuno Espirito Santo is doing an excellent job at Nottingham Forest. 13 big chances for Chris Wood, 90 FPL points. His ownership is still very high at 23.8%, and he still makes a mockery of that price tag of 6.6 million. And some of the other underlying stats are really impressive, like an XG figure of 5.96, but you might also argue there is a massive overperformance in terms of that metric, and the creativity is next to nothing. Only one big chance created and 6 key passes. But as long as he keeps up this goal scoring rate, I don't think anybody would care. That includes Nottingham Forest fans and those that own him in FPL. If you have kept Bryan Mbeumo like myself, the patience has certainly been rewarded, with 23 points across the last 2 game weeks, facing Newcastle at home and Chelsea away, back-to-back double-digit hauls. I think Mbeumo is one of the best midfielders in the game. Despite Brentford's tough fixtures, he is always capable of getting a big return, and he has proven that in the last 2 game weeks. I actually covered him back in Game Week 13 when he had Leicester at home and Aston Villa away. He blanked in both of those matches, but I still kept him and started him in the last 2 game weeks, and the rest is history. You do have some kind of mixed bag fixtures still for Brentford, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel with fixtures like Southampton away in Game Week 20, and we'll see how the Saints get on with their new manager. But Mbeumo has only 1 blank in home matches this season. I wouldn't recommend selling him against Nottingham Forest, who have been one of the best teams in the Premier League this season, but Brentford are really excellent in home matches, so that's going to be a very interesting game, and I think Mbeumo can cause problems to Brighton and Arsenal. I think he can do it against anybody in the country. That's 10 goals and 2 assists this season. The XGI is really impressive as well, 8.32. All the underlying stats are quite decent for Mbeumo, 27 key passes, 10 big chances, and an XG figure of 4.82, which might not be the best, but it's still a solid number, and Mbeumo is a quality finisher. You could make the same case for Wissa being a hold for the next couple of weeks, but Mbeumo remains the best Brentford asset in FPL. Another player I talked about holding very recently is Morgan Rogers. The next 2 fixtures are tough on paper, but Man City have 1 victory out of the last 11 games. Morgan Rogers might have a point to prove facing his former club, and Newcastle away is not going to be the easiest, to be fair. St James's Park can be a fortress, but at the same time, Aston Villa will have chances in that game, and Newcastle can go from hot to cold, from 100 to 0. They're a very inconsistent team, and Rodgers is definitely worth holding on to at that price and below. But when you see Amad Diallo with the form he's showing at an even cheaper price point, you've also got Buonanotte when he gets back into the Leicester City 11, and I probably wouldn't invest in him right now. You've also got Tyler Dibling as a very cheap enabler to facilitate the likes of Palmer, Salah, Saka, Isak, Jackson, and a premium defender. There are so many different options in the midfield you can go for, not to mention Smith-Rowe and Iwobi with excellent fixtures for Fulham. But Morgan Rogers is definitely one to consider holding on to, with 4 goals and 2 assists this season and some decent statistics like an XGI figure of 5.23 and 61 FPL points. He's also fixture proof. He played very well against Arsenal, albeit no FPL points to show for it, and he got a goal at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and bonus points despite Aston Villa losing 4-1 on that particular occasion. So I think Morgan Rogers is a hold in many scenarios, and unless you're upgrading him to a Bryan Mbeumo at some stage or one of Saka, Salah or Palmer, I don't really see who you should go to that is so much of a standout that it makes Morgan Rogers worth selling. A similar argument can be made for Emil Smith-Rowe, with Fulham having excellent fixtures and they've shown a lot of promising signs in recent weeks, but Emil Smith-Rowe was benched against Liverpool, and we saw something identical a few months ago against Man City, where Fulham on that occasion shifted to a back five and Smith Rowe was the sacrifice. But in most of these games coming up, he should start these games and do very well, particularly against Southampton, Bournemouth and Ipswich Town. He might be benched against Chelsea away, and I wouldn't recommend starting him there anyway, but he has scored at Stamford Bridge before, although it was a different team and different circumstances indeed. Chelsea are much better now than they were back then, but Smith Rowe is definitely a decent FPL asset, maybe not a standout option, and I wouldn't look to invest in him right now until he shows maybe more consistency and we don't see as many benchings in some of these really tough games away from home. But thankfully, Fulham have some plum fixtures in 5 out of the next 6 game weeks where they could get multiple victories, keep a clean sheet or 2, and score multiple goals in the process. The standout Fulham attacker for me is probably Iwobi as that kind of budget option. He's going to start every single game, but he does play different roles. He's so versatile, and that could be to his detriment in FPL because he can also play as a wing-back, which he essentially did against Arsenal, or as a holding midfielder. With Emil Smith Rowe, though, he's always going to play in the pockets as the number 10, linking up with a striker, and you may argue that Jimenez will be the best Fulham attacker, but I could see a rotation with Rodrigo Muniz, especially if the Mexican has 2 or 3 poor games in a row. And oddly enough, I still think there are better options in the forward line compared to the midfield, so you've got more choices in the attacking positions, and I don't think there are many standouts in the midfield position, but you can certainly point towards Amad Diallo being the best budget midfielder right now, and I talked about buying him only a couple of weeks ago. I would urge patience and caution with this particular pick, whether you hold or sell Matheus Cunha. I believe it's very likely he's going to face a retrospective ban and suspension based on what happened after the Ipswich Town game, where he got into a scuffle and altercation with an Ipswich Town staff member. I think if the FA review that footage and they apply the necessary punishment, Cunha could miss several Premier League matches at the very least. In terms of how many matches that would be, that is going to be purely speculation, and there is a chance Cunha does go unscathed, but I think it is very unlikely. Now, in any case, I think Cunha is sellable from Game Week 18 onwards because Wolves have a terrible fixture run once again from that point onwards. They don't have a manager, so there could be a managerial bounce now because it was getting a bit stale with Gary O'Neill, but Cunha was always performing for Wolves week in, week out. Even in Game Week 16, he scored a brilliant goal and got maximum bonus points for his efforts. He is a great player for Wolves, and he might be sold in the summer. It's going to be too hard to keep a player of that quality, especially if Wolves go down to the Championship. That's 8 goals and 3 assists for the Brazilian this season, and 46 shots, which is mightily impressive. And it's not just the goal-scoring stats that really appeal to me. It's also the creativity. 29 key passes, 9 big chances created, and the XGI is very healthy. It's around 5. So I think Cunha could arguably be a hold if he doesn't get a suspension. I don't think he's a priority sell in that case, but I believe the suspension will come into effect, and we'll discuss this in future videos like my team selection because I've owned Cunha for several weeks now, and he could be on the chopping block for me for either a -4 or -8 hit. So be sure to check that out. And if he doesn't get that ban, I'll keep him against Leicester City and then reassess. But I think Cunha will become a sell at some point very soon. One Wolves player who is definitely going to be suspended for Game Week 17 is Rain Aït-Nouri. He was on a yellow card, and after the match, he got into a scuffle, another Wolves player doing it for the second consecutive game week. Well, that has resulted in a second yellow card, and that means he's out for the Leicester City game, which he was going to be suspended for anyway because he had 5 yellow cards, but because it got turned into a red, he is now going to be suspended for Game Week 17. He comes back against Man United, and if he gets a yellow in that game, he's going to be suspended for Game Week 19. So it's just a really poor situation for those that went for Rain Aït-Nouri. He got an assist very recently against West Ham and 4 points, which isn't too shabby, but -2 points over the weekend, which simply isn't good enough. And Wolves are one of the worst teams in the Premier League. Their defence is woeful. So with Aït-Nouri, it's just the goals and assist threat, which has always been the main appeal. 3 goals and 3 assists is very impressive for a left-back, and 13 shots inside the box, but this is a very simple one. I was recommending holding Aït-Nouri for Ipswich Town and Leicester away, and then selling him in Game Week 18. Well, the time has come. I would do it right now, and selling Aït-Nouri to Robinson, Joachim Andersen if he's fit, Levi Colwill, and all these defenders I've discussed recently, like Kirkers and Lewis Hall, that's what I would do, especially if you're in dire need of bolstering your defensive line. Aston Villa threw the game away against Nottingham Forest. They were quite unfortunate with certain decisions. They should have been awarded a penalty in the first half, which would have been won by Morgan Rogers. But I've always said of Luca Dean, do not buy this guy. He is an FPL troll. And in a week where a lot of people did that, and I believe it was Southampton at home, Luca Dean was on the bench. I experienced that firsthand in UCL Fantasy this season and in the past during his time at Everton and Aston Villa. Whenever I go for Luca Dean, it ends in pain and misery. I don't see many clean sheets in the next 4 game weeks, although Leicester at home looks like a plum fixture, and Aston Villa can surprise you. They kept a clean sheet against a very good Man City side last season, and that was City's last loss until basically this year, where they started losing for fun. But I just wouldn't go for Luca Dean, Concert, and all these defenders. Emi Martinez in goal. You can find much more consistency with clean sheets and even attacking returns in some cases than the Frenchman. But that is the main appeal with him. He's got the assist for it, and that's free for the season. But Robertson has double the number, and he plays in a better defence and arguably a better team right now. So you could just go for one of those defenders I just mentioned, like Levi Colwill, Kirkes, etc. All of them would be much better options than Luca Dean. We're now onto the skip section, and it has been a while since I've covered Diogo Jota due to his injury, but he's back. He scored against Fulham off the bench, and that's something I really like about Diogo Jota. Even if you don't see him in the starting 11, he's one of those players that can come off the bench and in a very limited cameo, he can score a goal and salvage you something. So that's one really big tick and plus point about the Portuguese international. My issue with Jota, though, is his minutes are going to be all over the place. I think he's going to be kind of eased into things. They don't want to rush him back in. He's an injury-prone player, unfortunately, and that's my biggest concern with him. Even when he does start games consistently, which could be by game week 18 or 19, is he going to stay fit? And I'll be honest, the case studies, the examples, and the proof in the pudding would suggest that Diogo Jota will get injured at some stage. If he can stay injury-free, he will be a great option, and he will become part of the template in the midfield alongside Salah, Palmer, and Saka, especially those that still have Bryan Mbeumo. You might be tempted to go for this sort of punt, and Liverpool are the best team in the country right now. They have dropped points though in the last couple of games, so they need to get their act together in game week 17. Otherwise, Chelsea are right on their tail. But I do like Jota as an asset when he does stay fit. But unfortunately, even when I will start recommend buying him, it's only going to be a short to medium term punt because you're just kind of waiting until the next injury happens. But the main reason why I'm skipping Jota for the time being is because I don't see him starting the next 3 games in a row, and you can get more consistency with starts, minutes, and returns from the likes of Bryan Mbeumo and all the midfielders I've discussed in my recent transfer tips and best wildcard team videos. The 11th and final player covered today will be Ashley Young, and this essentially applies to every single Everton player. That can be Mikalenko, Jordan Pickford, Calvert-Lewin, God forbid, do not go there. I just don't recommend going for Everton players because their fixtures remain atrocious. I know they just kept the clean sheet at the Emirates, and if you can do it there, you can virtually do it in any single stadium. But I also think Arsenal were very poor on the day. They made things too easy for Everton, who were solid defensively, a great structure, and Sean Dyche got his tactics spot on. But I think if you score against this Everton side early, you can actually batter them. We saw that recently with Man United. Tottenham did it earlier in the season. Southampton beat Everton also earlier in the campaign. So I don't fully trust Everton to get clean sheets in the next couple of matches. I think Chelsea and Man City will still beat them, and I just don't think it's the right time to invest in Ashley Young, who has been a great FPL asset, by the way. 62 FPL points for a mid-priced to budget defender. That is mightily impressive. His ownership is 3.2%. By the time Everton have a double game week, I'd look to invest in Ashley Young and maybe 2 Everton defenders in general, but that double game week will comprise of Liverpool at home, their fiercest rivals. It's going to be the last Merseyside derby at Goodison Park, and it's going to be a difficult game to keep a clean sheet in. But Ashley Young has 1 goal and 3 assists this season. His expected assist figure is 1.31, and back in the day, he was an exciting winger for Aston Villa and Man United, and he has changed his game to remain a very competitive player in the Premier League. But I will not be buying him just yet, and it looks like game week 24 or 25 could be the time that Liverpool and Everton will double. So as we approach that stage of the season, you could start to invest in Ashley Young, but right now, I believe that would be a mistake. And there we have it, 11 players to buy, hold, sell and skip ahead of game week 17, all covered in FPL. And the most transferred up player right now is Reinier Nuri. I mean, I have no objections, no surprises. I'm not a big fan of early transfers, but I think Aït-Nouri to Robinson, as one example, is such an easy move to make. And yeah, I honestly don't have too many objections about it. I always try to encourage people to wait and have more information. We've got Carabao Cup games in midweek, and there's still a game to go in the Premier League on Monday night. But I think selling Aït-Nouri just makes a lot of sense, and that's one of the easiest decisions you'll have to make for the entire season. The likes of Haaland, Watkins, Rodgers and Welbeck are also in the top 5, and I've covered a lot of these players in my recent transfer tips videos as well, and essentially everyone you see on this list I've covered at some point throughout my FPL content. But thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's try to get this to the 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards 31,000 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server, FPL League, Draft Hound, as well as Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It goes a long way to support my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Gameweek 17 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.